Hello, are you preparing for GRE? Great. But are you learning a lot of words and memorizing word lists? Not so great. Why? Well, welcome to the second part of learning about GRE from First Academy. In this episode, we'll look at what and hows of learning vocabulary for GRE. While learning for GRE and while preparing for it, most of us make the common mistake of memorizing lists and lists and lists of words. This doesn't take you very far. Why? Just stop for a moment and think about it. In the verbal section of GRE, how many questions do you have? And what kind of questions do you have? There are only two kinds of questions. One is a reading comprehension question, and the second one is a sentence completion question. And neither of these questions asks you for meanings of words. So, why are we learning words and their meanings? Well, that's because we are used to. For the past 12 years since GRE's inception, GRE has been focusing on analogies, synonyms and antonyms. But for the past 7 to 10 years, that has no longer been the case. So what is GRE focusing on now? Do we need to learn words at all, or can we skip them? Well, the answer is not so straightforward. You do need to learn words, but in a way that is different from what has been done so far. And why is there a need for this difference? That is because the nature of GRE has changed, and what GRE is looking for in a candidate has also changed. Gone are the days when memorizing words could give you a good score in GRE. GRE is now accounting for that. GRE does not want people who can memorize. GRE wants people who are smart. GRE wants people who can understand the language at a level that is greater than what is usually understood by people. So what does it hit you with? It hits you with complex sentences and phrases. So how does it work? Let's look at a question that's going to be on the screens right in front of you now. So read the question on your screens very, very carefully. Now, first, like we all do, like we're all tempted to do, look at the answer options. You have three words: rarely, neatly, and cheaply. All these are words that we think we know. By that virtue, answering this question should be easy. But go back to the question. Can you for sure tell me what the answer is and why? I'm sure most of you are wondering if the answer is A, B, or C, because all of them fit perfectly. And that is something that GRE does with each of its questions. Irrespective of whether the question has 1 blank, 2 blank, or 3 blanks, GRE ensures that every answer option is grammatically perfectly fitting into that particular blank. So you can't eliminate a word based on whether or not it is grammatically accurate. So what do we need? Well, in this case, we need to look at the sentence. So let's go back and look at the sentence. What does the sentence say? Noted for their economy of style, the stories of Guy de Maupassant are dash resolved. So what is the blank about? First, let's look at what GRE does very frequently. Guy de Maupassant. He's a French guy, very, very good short stories. If you want to improve your vocabulary, you should read these guys' short stories, and we'll give a link to where you can find the short stories free in the description below. Okay? So let's go back to the question. Ignore that word. Just think that it is a person. The stories of someone are dash resolved. The blank is talking about how the stories are resolved. But how are they resolved? Rarely, neatly, cheaply? We don't really know. For that, we'd have to go back to the question. What does the question say? Not just about Guy de Maupassant, which we are not worried about, but about his stories. They are noted for their economy of style. Now, individually, you know all the words that are there in the sentence. But what does the phrase economy of style mean? Well, that is the kicker. It's not the word, is the phrase. And it's not just the phrase, it's the context. What does the word economy mean? Economy could mean any number of things depending on the context in which the word appears. So just knowing the meaning of the word economy might not always be enough. This is where our preparation for vocabulary comes into play. How should we prepare? So economy could mean the economy of a country. Economy could mean something else. In this context, what does the phrase economy of style mean? In this context, economy of style means the efficient use of style. What do you mean by efficient use of style? Using style only when it is required. So in this context, what the sentence is trying to say is that these short stories are not unnecessarily or overly stylish. Now that you have the context, think about the phrase. What do you call someone who's not unnecessarily stylish? Is that a negative thing or is that a positive thing? Obviously, it's a positive thing. Someone who's not unnecessarily stylish. So, we are looking at someone who's very simple. So, how are this guy's short stories? They are very simple. They come to a close very simply, very cleanly, very neatly. And that brings us to the answer to this particular question. How are Guy de Maupassant's stories resolved? They are neatly resolved. It's not rare, it's not cheap. And by the way, when you're looking at the word cheap, it could have a very strong negative connotation. So please be careful while you're using words like these. You might know these words, you might think you know these words, but in GRE, context is king. Context is absolutely everything. So when you're learning words, don't learn just the meanings. What you need to learn is the context. So how do we understand the context of a word? In most cases, it is the sentence that determines the context, and that is not really in our control. What are the other things that determine the context of the word? The first thing is the purpose. Why is a word being used and how is it being used? Let's consider the word stem. The word stem could be used as either a verb or a noun. The stem of a plant will mean that it's being used as a noun. When you say the doctors are trying to stem the bleed, it is being used as a verb, an action. So the moment a word has been used differently from what we are familiar with, it means that the purpose has changed. So how do we identify the purpose of a word? Understand the parts of speech. And in GRE, the words that you're usually expected to know and understand fall into three primary categories. One is that they are either a noun, two, that they are a verb. And besides these, they are descriptive words, words that either describe the noun or the verb. It could be either an adjective or an adverb. Without going into definitions of these, we simply call them descriptive words. So, the three kinds of things that you need to be familiar with are nouns, verbs, and descriptive words. That should be your first step in understanding vocabulary. That should be your first step in figuring out how a word is used. So, when you come across a new word, don't just learn its meaning, look at the different ways in which the word could be used. If understanding parts of speech by itself becomes a challenge, a simpler way of doing it is plugging in a word within a sentence and see how the sentences work. With this, we come to a close for today's session on the first step of learning words for GRE. For more such videos, please like, share, and subscribe.